Nathan Dickeson, I appreciate you coming on today. I was looking at your Instagram just 5 minutes ago. I love the idea of doing your own thing like you guys do. What got you started doing that?
Okay, so how I got started into the self-reliance kind of design is honestly from the very youngest age, I was always interested in running away to the woods. I was always growing up, I was always like, I'm going to build a house in the woods. I'm gonna grow some potatoes. And then over time, I have a very engineering mind, and I have a very good grasp of finance. And I realized that a lot of people can't afford a $40,000 solar array to make themselves be able to go off grid in the middle of nowhere. And so what I started doing was I really enjoyed looking at random technologies and researching how they worked and then over time, it just slowly grew into this kind of design framework that I had for a self-reliant house. And then after I finished the technological design to go off grid, I started researching more along the lines of what a lot of people who want to go off into the woods do, of self-reliance, of food production and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man. I'll be honest with you. You know you're on the right direction when it slowly grows into more than you expected.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? You automatically know you're in the right direction, because something that's a bad idea would slowly fizzle out, even if your passion was still there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just keeps getting cooler and cooler. And then honestly, so you came from TikTok and Instagram of my stuff that I talk about on there. And I started producing videos for that, for kind of I'll start producing these because the marketer side of me knows that it takes a lot of time to build up traction. So it's like, well, I have a giant stack. Like, this is just one of the stacks. I don't know, your podcast is probably just audio, but I have a big fat stack of papers of notes. And that's just one of my stacks of just one of the subjects that I've researched. And so I was like, well, I've got this stacks and stacks of notes of research from over almost a decade of research at this point. And while I slowly work on getting all of that nonsense organized, I'll start making videos. And I guess a lot of people were pretty interested in what I had to say because I got traction way faster than I ever expected.
Yeah, I love it, man. Number one, it's a lot of fun to see someone on an adventure. Everybody's looking for that reality TV show aspect. And two, I write down everything on paper myself. I have all my redundancies in paper. Where's my camera? There's got to be 50 of these because I'm so behind on some of my podcasts. And technically, I'm going video now. I'm following the same steps you're going. I started off slowly with the audio. I'm going with the video now because, like you said, marketing wise, there's a lot more involved in TikTok and YouTube than just the podcast.
Yep.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. So yeah, I've got like 3 months worth of research in a big stack of paper. I find, I don't know what your age is, but I'm in my 40s. Writing it down while I'm learning multiplies my ability to absorb it and even organize it in my brain a little bit.
Yeah, there's actually been quite a few studies that if you physically write it, your brain processes it into long-term memory storage better than if you just listen to it and try and remember it, or even just typing it up.
Yes, for some reason, when I type it up, I do not get a quarter of the value from that.
Yeah, so yeah, I have stacks of notes all over the place. I have lots of digital notes too, but I was like, well, I'll get things organized and start producing videos in the meantime. And now everybody keeps grumbling like, do you have a book for this stuff? And I'm like, no, I have notes.
Well, this should lead into a book if you were smart.
It will.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you.
I've actually written 2 books due to this same kind of process. I wrote a fantasy novel that just slowly expanded over time, and that was my first entrepreneurial venture. I was like, well, I got no money, so I'll write a fantasy novel and see how that goes.
Yeah.
And then as I was studying finance, which was a similar process to me studying self-reliance, I just had a big stack of notes, and then I was like, well, I have this big stack of notes, I'll just turn it into a book. So I did both those books. So I've already got a little bit of practice in writing books, and this one's going to be hopefully a really good book, because I really want to flush everything out and make it possible for the end goal is I want to make as many people who are interested in being self-reliant being able to do it no matter what their background is. Like I want to include designs for people who are in the tropics and third world countries, to people in Canada who are like, well, I've got a few $100,000 to play around with, so what do I need to do to make a luxury off-grid house?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to make sure I can get everyone included, so that way anyone, and technical skills, somebody who's really good with their hands will find a lot of stuff super easy to do themselves. But for people who maybe have worked in an office their whole life and don't know the other end of a screwdriver, they need step-by-step IKEA steps to how to do a lot of this stuff.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think everybody needs it. Even the well-prepared need that, because what you've already done can't be duplicated unless it's been followed by instruction.
Yep.
If you have a pitfall, just one of your pitfalls that someone else doesn't have knowledge of, you've already saved them sometimes weeks, maybe years.
Yeah.
And so it's well worth just going through it all. There's so many logistics, man. My father, when the economy collapsed, my father had chickens, goats, bees. We made our own maple syrup. We did all kinds of stuff back in the Bush recession there.
Yeah.
Because we had plenty of money, but no work at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we experimented. I'm a firm believer that everybody should be as self-reliant as humanly possible.
Yes.
Regardless of sex, gender, age, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Especially with how things are going right now, things are going to get more and more expensive. So just having a backyard vegetable garden will help a lot of people financially.
Well, if you're truly self-reliant, it should cost exactly the same as the last time.
Yeah.
There's no up and down on the value of a seed.
Yep.
If you're producing, storing, and saving it for next season yourself.
Yep. And that's one of the things that I really haven't understand about a lot of modern gardeners and farmers is they don't ever save seeds. They're always like, oh, we got to buy new seed. I'm like, no, you don't. The plants are designed to give you seeds, so replant the seeds.
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's the effort, because every plant has a different effort. Some have to be dried, some have to be this, some have to be that. There's all these different aspects of how to preserve it, which I'll be honest with you, I've learned with the chickens, because my dad literally grew his own chickens. He hatched those things himself. There's a lot of trial and error on doing things wrong and doing things right.
Mm-hmm.
Even with instruction, you're still going to find out things for you that are going to work better, that you need to do the hard way.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point of the ultimate goal might be to be completely self-reliant, but sometimes, like for instance, and I think I've made a video of this in the past, yes, you could grow your own grains, but the amount of efficiency that comes from industrial level grain production is just so ridiculous compared to home operation grain production that yes, you could theoretically be completely self-sufficient in grain production if you wanted to, but grains are not expensive. You can buy your grains pretty easy. So,
but we'll see next year, man, with Ukraine the way it is and a couple other circumstances that are flushing themselves out. I don't know how it's going to play out.
That's true, which is why I have a big grain vault for grain production if the option of just buying grains goes away.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I'll be honest with you though, man, meat's the key.
Meat is always the key. Meat is so important. And everyone loves chickens. I love chickens. Chickens are super great producers of eggs, and just meat chickens are, it's like an 8-week turnaround for meat chickens. But they need grain. And if, again, back to the, if you don't have access to the grains, then you're beginning to get into a bit of an issue.
Well, chickens will eat almost anything, man. I've thrown pumpkins in there. I've thrown the big green worms from the tomato plants, those monster green. Man, they kill each other over those things. It was like a delicacy.
Yep. Yeah. There's quite a few. One of my most popular videos was actually, I think it was 5 different chicken alternative feeds. And if we can go through those real quick if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely, man.
The number 1 is duckweed. Duckweed is a aquatic plant, so you'll need some sort of water, but it can be a tub, and it multiplies in mass every 2 days. Like, it doubles in mass every 2 days. So and it's a very high protein feed source like soy. So you can, if you have a little bit of water with some fish, you can make a massive amount of chicken feed just from that one. And then corn is pretty easy on the grain level for producing food. Pumpkins, like you already mentioned, you have the pumpkin flesh, but then the pumpkin seeds are also really useful for all sorts of livestock. And then worms, creating a little worm farm just to process all sorts of compostable material. You're now generating a very high protein feed source, worms, for your chickens. And like you said, they'll fight over that like a delicacy. And then I'm spacing on what my 5th one was, but that's 4 of some pretty super useful feed sources that you can do for chickens that don't take a whole lot of effort.
No, man, actually they're redundant because they're helping in other issues. When you're composting food, now you're making fertilizer for the plants, and it's excuse me, it's a reciprocal scenario all by itself, and a problem that needs to be solved anyways.
Yep. And then you have, between the compost that's being produced from like the worms and the chicken manure, you now have a great compost mix to use for your garden, for your vegetables, which you then can feed your chicken or your kitchen scraps to your chickens as well.
Yeah. Because whatever you don't eat, there's an animal out there willing to eat it for you.
Yep.
Yeah, my grandmother went through the Depression in Maine, and she said they got so poor at one point in the wintertime that they fed the chickens little pieces of the Sears Roebuck magazine. Her mom made her and her sister spend hours cutting a little piece, and they just throw it out, and the chickens would just eat it. Something was better than nothing, I guess.
Yep.
And I guess they just ate extra chickens because they were just so broke that one winter.
Yeah.
But you'd be amazed what animals can eat, what scavenge, and
yeah. Especially animals like chickens and pigs. They're scavengers. Their job is to eat
like everything. A dog. Yeah, like a dog. Yeah, it's amazing.
So another really good meat production animal, since we talked about chickens a little bit, would be rabbits. I think everyone, including people who are in apartments, as long as the apartment doesn't have strict rules against pet rabbits, everyone should have a couple of meat rabbits just for food security purposes. It's because breeding like rabbits is a thing. You breed rabbits and you get a very quick turnaround of a good meat source.
Now there's not a lot of fat in
no, and
so that's going to be an issue. I mean, it's better than starving.
Yeah, it's better than starving. But if you're in a really tight situation like what we're talking about right now, vegetable oil still is in existence usually because it's an industrial byproduct. So combining rabbits, which is a high protein feed source, with super cheap canola oil, then you're
go a long way. Yeah, it'll go a long way.
You'll go a long way.
Yeah. So I heard a guy one time say bread is a poor man's meat.
Yep.
Because you could live indefinitely on meat.
Yep, you can live indefinitely on meat, and you theoretically can live indefinitely on bread too. Like, it's been done where, like, throughout a lot of history, entire sectors of peasants lived almost exclusively on bread. And when there was bread shortages, there was bread riots. because bread, specifically wheat and barley breads, contain most of the nutrients you need to function properly. Your body will slowly start to shut down, but we're talking years process.
Yeah, even a decade maybe. So
Yeah,
you'll definitely make it through a famine.
Yeah. And so breads work great, meats work great. And both like for instance, the rabbits, and then almost anyone can do at least a little bit of a vegetable garden, unless you're in a really tight urban situation.
I was gonna say, as long as you're not in a city, you should be able to find something. My
Yeah.
neighbor had onions in their front yard for years.
Yeah.
When I was up north, strawberries would run wild.
Yep.
Yeah.
I come from a region where blueberries grow super wild. Okay. And so there's lots of blueberries, and I'm currently living in a region where blackberries are considered a pest.
Yes. So, yeah. I lived in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and we actually literally had the goats eating the prickers just to get rid of all the prickers with the raspberries and stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. They're like, they grow too big. Get rid of them.
They are. They can be a nuisance. They're so thick. When you try to get, it's inconvenient sometimes. All right. So my question to you is, what got you started? What was the day you said, I'm going to do this?
Okay. So what really got me started, like full-fledged, like hard focused on it, was COVID-19 started up, and the level of fragility in the system was made much more apparent to me. With it's when we started having lockdowns, and grocery stores were empty in a lot of places, and people were like, we can't get food. And then just the restrictions, the government control of everyone's lives. I was like, I don't particularly like that. So that's when I went from just it kind of being like a side interest of, well, I've been studying this for years, but I've only been studying things that I'm super interested in and not going super in depth. I've been studying a wide array of stuff. When COVID started and I started seeing the global order kind of start showing its fragility, I was like, well, time to start really honing in on this. So that's kind of what triggered it. And then I'd already been researching it for a long time. So I began to try and piece it all together. I was like, okay, what do I need to be completely self-sufficient and have like a 21st century lifestyle? And like all the creature comforts of the 21st century. So then I began just taking piece by piece and examining it. I spent 2 years on refrigeration by itself.
Okay. What was the solution for refrigeration? You use a root cellar? What kind of scenario are we looking at?
If you're up north, a root cellar is easy peasy. My situation is, and if you're in a desert region, storage is pretty easy. When you're in a hot, humid environment, it gets really tricky. So I combined several different technologies. The first one is it's a glorified ice house, but it's called a yakchal, and it's basically designed for hot regions that don't get a lot of ice. And you take advantage of during the winter months, the nighttime is usually pretty cool, and even in most of the world, unless you're in the subtropics or tropics, if you're in a hot region like we think of like the South or like Arizona, your nighttime still drops below freezing, but it's not below freezing for very long. So you basically make these thin sheets of ice throughout the night and on the north side of the building, so that way it's even colder because the sun never hits that spot directly. And then in the morning, you basically break up the sheets and stack them, and then how ice works is it basically forms into one solid block.
And not only that, but it starts insulating itself when you start
Yeah.
stacking them next to each other and on top of each other and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it starts insulating itself. So that's how you produce a ice house in all but the hottest regions of the world. And then there's the issue of the cost of building an ice house. So, and specifically the insulation costs of it. You can go with like an Adobe fixture, but that's a lot of labor. So what I really latched on to is mycelium insulation, mushroom insulation. Mycelium is the root structures of mushrooms instead of the fruiting body, which is what we think of mushrooms.
Yeah.
And it has about the same R value as fiberglass. And it grows really quick. The key with that one, though, is you have to make sure you bake it and make sure it's dead, because otherwise it'll keep growing.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Okay.
So I got the ice house figured out, and then I was really wanting to make it so it's a farmer's level ice house, like being able to, like, I can only produce so much ice, but I want to be able to keep that ice cold throughout the year. And that's where I started studying what is called a Tromp tower. And it's not Trump, it's Tromp. And it's a ancient air compressor, and it uses water to compress air. And then you can just use the compressed air to run what is called a vortex tube, which basically splits compressed air into two streams, and you have a hot stream and a sub-freezing stream. So I can use that to just supplement the cooling effect to try and keep a larger area cold. So the ice is keeping the room kind of at a base level, and then I can use the compressed air to drop it to like deep freezer levels. So now I have a giant walk-in freezer.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
So that whole process took me quite a while. And then I was working on air conditioning, which is the other half. As ice melts, it creates ice water, which is pretty cold. And if you keep it in a cistern, you can run you can build your house with what is called a wind catcher. And basically, when the wind passes over a space, the side that is on the far side of where the wind is blowing creates kind of a micro vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. So if you have the tower connected to the inside of your house, it will suck air out of your house. And so you can then create a negative vacuum in your house. So if you have the inlet tubes connected to that cistern, you're now drawing in cold ice water air into your house.
That is absolutely phenomenal, man. I love the physics of that. That's great.
So that was probably the most complicated thing. I tried to explain it as simple as I could, but
No, you explained it perfectly, man. That was great. Because I was wondering, I was like, man, he must be putting air through the tube, and the cold water is cooling the tube, and that's how he's cooling the air. That was my original thought when you started. Mm-hmm. But to hear you suck from the far side of the house on the other side of the wind and getting that vortex makes perfect sense, man. You got to get the air from somewhere once it's negative.
Yeah,
it wants to equal out.
Yep. So yeah, you just put a tube there and it does it by itself. You don't need any motors or anything.
I thought you were just going to do like a thermal thing, to be honest with you, when you started talking. So you say you use solar panels.
Yes.
Have you done enough research to be concrete on the fact that you think that's the best strategy?
I am actually very anti-solar panel compared to most people.
There you go. I find the windmills seem to be a more energy output for a small situation.
Yes.
I know on large scale it becomes an issue, but individually on the houses, I did the research because I was going to do it on my house, and the windmills were superior. You need a bridge rectifier and a couple other things with electricity, but it is a far superior product and it lasts longer.
Yep. And if you're in a really tight situation where, let's say, China goes offline for some reason, like it already is, and solar panels become harder and harder to find, windmill components are nowhere near as complex as solar panels.
Oh yeah, if you're willing to go hard enough, you can get them out of a treadmill. You can get the motor out of a treadmill, and I literally jigaboot some crazy stuff up, man. I had like this computer desk chair, the motor. I used a PVC pipe as like I had a pretty nice setup. Took a long time to get that thing to work though, man.
Yeah. The only reason I think solar panels are pushed as hard as they are is because they really work better than windmills in two locations: deep urban areas where tall buildings are interfering with wind patterns, and desert areas where it's shining all the time and there's usually not a ton of wind. Both of those are correlated to Silicon Valley, which is the tech bros hub. So they're all like, oh yeah, we have to do solar. Solar is so amazing. I'm like, most of the rest of the world, windmills actually work way better.
We did have some issues here in Texas with the windmills, but and the solar panels. So they're not flawless in and of themselves.
Yes, but combining both is always the answer. You want both.
Hydraulic is another one that's pretty useful.
If you have access to hydraulic is perfect. Hydraulic is the pinnacle of self-reliant energy.
On several levels, but you got to make sure you have water.
Yeah.
Our creek dried up because we haven't had we haven't had rain in a couple of years outside of like yesterday.
Yeah, my property is in Oklahoma, so it's just above you guys.
Yeah, you know how dry it is. Okay.
It was a bad drought this year.
Yeah. Pretty tough, man. I don't know if Oklahoma's worse, but I'm outside of San Antonio. I would say the last 2 years maybe rained like 5 times.
Oklahoma's better than Texas. Oklahoma gets more water than Texas, but it's pretty similar environment.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially the part of Oklahoma I'm from. I'm on the eastern side, so we still catch a lot of the eastern storms.
Okay, good deal.
So
you got to worry about tornadoes.
Yeah, and tornadoes are a big deal.
So what's your plan on that?
Well, I bought property sandwiched between 2 mountains, so tornadoes are a big deal for everyone else. I don't have to worry about it.
Okay, fair enough.
But the town I go where I go to town, that's still on the plains, but it's so it's been hit by a tornado once in its entire history. So it's still theoretically possible that it could be hit by a tornado, but where I'm at, there's no tornadoes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. I'm far enough south from where you are. We don't have tornadoes that often either. Almost never. Yeah. A hurricane came through like 8 or 9 years ago, or like the remnants of it. But
yeah. But you're far enough in that it's not that big of a deal.
No.
So.
But when I was in Connecticut, man, we had hurricanes and we had microbursts where wind would just blow at 100 miles per hour for no reason, knock over a bunch of trees, really random.
Yep. Yeah. Oklahoma is a very windy state. There's a reason why the musical is Where the Winds Come Sweeping Down the Plains. Okay. And if you look very closely on my property, I can see a wind farm from my property. So back to wind being useful, I'm in a region where if you focus mostly on solar and kind of just ignore wind, you're being really dumb because wind is very effective in my region.
Yeah. Another real useful one is the thermal vents. And you don't even have to go that far down to get the temperature change.
Yep. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a super fancy heat pump system like everyone wants to do. It really can just be a car radiator, like a 6-8 foot trench where you lay a bunch of pipe and a pump, and you just pump water through and have a fan blowing over the radiator, and you have pretty decent geothermal control. Yeah.
There's so many solutions, so many options. It's actually fun to see someone work it through and play it through and all that stuff. So how big is your TikTok account now?
I am up to about 50,000 people. It's a little under that still, but last I checked, it was somewhere in the high 40s.
Very
So
cool.
it's close to 50,000 and it's just exploding. I was like, I've been working on other related stuff, trying to get attention for years. And then I make a few self-reliant TikToks and I'm getting like videos that are getting a couple million views. I'm like, whoa, this is not what I was expecting. I am not anywhere ready for this level of attention yet. I still need to organize my notes.
That's great, man. That's great. Now you're ready. You're ready. You just don't.
Yep.
Yeah, you're good, man. Very cool. How you got YouTube too, right? Or is it just Instagram?
Yep, I have YouTube. I have YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and my podcast. And I think those are the main things that I'm on.
Okay. Which one do you think works the best for you?
If people want to contact me, Instagram is by far the best. YouTube is still, I'm still trying to figure out YouTube. And then if you really want a lot of my content, either go to my podcast, which is the Principles of Success, or my TikTok. And my TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram are all at Nathan Dickeson. NATHANDICKESON.
Good deal. All right. So what do you see? How do you see this playing out for you in the next 18 months or 2 years?
Well, next 18 months, 2 years, I really just plan on producing content, trying to educate people. Hopefully things stay fairly stable, so people are not in too tight of a situation. But I plan on making content as I get everything organized. But over the long term, I would really like to be able to go to people's properties and help kind of assist them in setting things up so that way they can be self-sufficient.
I like that. I like that. That's a great idea, man. Yeah, that's a great endeavor. I don't see any of the technology going anywhere. No matter who's in charge, what they want, what they're doing, if they make mistakes, they don't make mistakes. They don't want 300 million people restless.
No, they don't.
So entertainment will succeed.
Yep, give them circuits and bread.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And YouTube seems to be taking over TV.
Yep.
Almost hands down. I don't know anybody that buys cable television anymore.
I don't either, not really.
It's such a weird thing to buy.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yep. Like who buys television?
Yeah, it's such a weird thing to do now. So that's pretty funny, man. Because even if you want football, there's all kinds of packages from all kinds of different venues. You don't even need to go through cable anymore.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, man. I appreciate your time, and I wish you well on everything. If you want to plug anything again, go for it, man. Especially
just my podcast is the Principles of Success. My social medias, we just listed them, and then I have my 2 books. One is called Gemini, The Beginning of the End. That's my fantasy. And then I have a book called The Blueprint of Wealth, and that's my finance book that is basically just a combination of all the notes and things that I use to try and make myself as successful as possible.
Very cool, man. Super cool. I wish you well, man. I really like what you're doing, and I hope we get back in touch again and do this one more time.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, man. You have a great day.
You too.
Weather is good, sun is shining, don't get my vibe.